Hello, I'm David Hughes. Welcome to Your Perfect Body, the podcast of the Esoteric Teaching Community. Today's selection is an essay entitled The Gate of Liberation, Part 2. In Bhagavad-gita, Krishna is advising Arjuna. Arjuna accepts his advice and addresses Krishna as Acyuta, the Infallible One. Krishna is Acyuta, infallible, because he never falls down. Cyuta means those who are fallen in the material world. They are Cyuta, fallible, because they have failed to avoid the trap of material existence. We are fallen in the material world, therefore we have accepted this material body. And because we have accepted the material body, we are afflicted by so many undesirable material qualities. Ichcha dvesha samutena dvandva mohena bharata sarva bhutani sammoham sarge yanti parantapa. O scion of Bharata, O conqueror of the foe, all living entities are born into delusion, bewildered by dualities arisen from desire and hate. Bhagavad-gita 7:27. Ichcha means desire, and dvesha means envy, hate. Ichcha dvesha samutena. When we become envious of Krishna and we want to enjoy this material world, then we come to this material creation. But because we are constitutionally not enjoyers, but servitors, we cannot satisfy our desires. Therefore, we become envious, spiteful, and hateful. And because of this, the material world is a hellish place of suffering and death. So all of us in this material world, having material bodies, from Lord Brahma down to the ant, are required to enjoy or suffer the resultant action of karma. It's stated in the esoteric teaching, Yas tvindra gopam atavendra maho svakarma bandhanurupa phalabhajanamattanoti karmani nirdahati kintu chabhakti bhajam govindam adipurusham tamaham bhajami. He impartially ordains for each living entity the due enjoyment of the fruits of their activities, for all those who walk in the path of work in accordance with the chain of their previously performed works, no less in the case of the tiny Indra Gopa germ than in that of Indra, king of the Devas. I therefore adore the primeval Lord Govinda, who burns to the roots all the karma of those who are imbued with devotion for him. Brahma Samhita 554. There is a germ called in Sanskrit Indra Gopa. It is a microbe so small that you cannot see it with the naked eye. This microbe is called Indra, and there is another Indra, the king of heaven. So the Brahma Samhita says, Yas tu Indra Gopa. Beginning from this Indra Gopa germ up to the king of heaven, everyone is subjected to enjoy or suffer the resultant action of his karma. By the resultant action of karma, material cause and effect, one jiva soul has become the king of heaven, and by karma, another jiva soul has become a microscopic Indra Gopa. This is material existence. There are 8,400,000 species or types of material bodies, and we are wandering through the different planets in many different forms. This is the material world, samsara. And in the material world, whatever form we may have, we have got attachment and identification with that body. Therefore, we are under the impression that I am this body. That is the material conception of life, or the material ontology. So, in the beginning of Bhagavad-gita, Arjuna was apparently overwhelmed by material consciousness. In the battlefield, he identified himself as the body. He thought that he belonged to the Kuru dynasty, and all his family and relatives were there to fight. On one side, his brothers, and on the other side, his cousins, nephews, grandfather, and guru. He became very much disturbed that I have to kill the other side, my cousins and my nephews, my grandfather? No, no, Krishna, I cannot. This is impossible. I shall not fight. So he refused to fight, and this set the stage for Krishna to speak Bhagavad-gita. Arjuna played the part of a conditioned soul under the impression that he is the material body. That is animal life, material consciousness. In the esoteric teaching it is said, Yasyatma buddhi kunape tridhatuke svadihi kalatradishu bhauma idjadhi Yatirta buddhi shalile nakarhichij janeshvabigneshu saeva gokaraha. A human being who identifies this body made of three elements with his self, who considers the byproducts of the body to be his kinsmen, who considers the land of birth worshipable, and who goes to the place of pilgrimage simply to take a bath rather than meet men of transcendental knowledge there, is considered like an ass or a cow. Srimad Bhagavatam 10.84.13. Anyone who is identifying himself with this body, which is made of tri dhatu, according to Ayurveda, there are three dhatus or physical elements of the body, kapha, pitta, and vayu, or mucus, bile, and air. As people who identified with this are called gokara, cows and asses. And people who travel to religious places of pilgrimage because one can get transcendental knowledge there. So if one travels to a place of pilgrimage to bathe in the sacred river and perform rituals, but has no interest to associate with persons who are expert in transcendental knowledge, then he is simply a fool, wasting his time. So Arjuna played the part of a Goghara, an ordinary person, a fool who is identifying the material body as the self. Therefore, he required instruction from Krishna. This is the setup in the first chapter of Bhagavad-gita. Now the second chapter opens with Sanjaya Uvacha. Sanjaya is speaking to Dhritarashtra, the father of Duryodhana, the cousin of Arjuna, who has stolen the Vedic empire from its rightful heirs, the Pandava brothers. Sanjaya is seeing the battlefield within his heart by spiritual television, telepathy. Dhritarashtra was blind, but his secretary Sanjaya was narrating the activities in the battlefield to him. In the beginning of Bhagavad-gita, Dhritarashtra inquired from Sanjaya, Dharma kshetre kurukshetre samaveta yuyutsavaha mamaka pandavaschaiva kim akurvata Sanjaya. O Sanjaya, after my sons and the sons of Pandu assembled in the place of pilgrimage at Kurukshetra, desiring to fight, what did they do? Bhagavad-gita 1.1. King Akurvata Sanjaya, what did they do, Sanjaya? Sometimes Bhagavad-gita is misinterpreted that the battlefield of Kurukshetra, Dharmakshetra, Kurukshetra, means this body. The exoteric teaching does not misinterpret in that way. We are presenting Bhagavad-gita as it is. We do not change the meaning by our whimsical imagination or concoction. We do not interpret the words of Bhagavad-gita according to our own desire. Actually, from a literary or philosophical point of view, interpretation is required only when things are not clear. In a court of law, for example, when the terms of the law are not very clear in the particular case, the lawyers try to interpret the law before the judge, and he passes a verdict. In the same way, amongst learned scholars, interpretation is required only when the original text is ambiguous. But interpretation is unnecessary when things are clear. Just like there is no need of a light to see the sun. The sun is self-effulgent. Similarly, Bhagavad-gita is perfectly clear and self-effulgent. Kurukshetra is an actual place in northwestern India where traditionally the Kuru kings would go to perform religious sacrifices. So there is no need of interpretation. This misinterpretation has kept